think Rosales is I think is an amazing place to be able to hold these classes. I think because of the historical significance of southern Spain, as far as what occurred here, uh, with regard to how human civilizations were shaped, and what was actually shown as being possible if we are able to have a set of guidelines and ethics that are able to direct how we go about shaping and putting together civilizations that are made of a broad array of people. I think anytime we have these courses, you never are quite sure of what you're going to get because you have people coming from different parts of the world, different experiences, different ways of seeing the world and understanding things. We're all gathering for a couple of weeks to cover material that I believe is new for many people, and especially the way that we go about framing it, trying to connect it to not only the current events and the way that the world is being shaped, and the dynamics that are actually shaping it, but also looking at the past and how it influences our present, and then how it will go about helping to direct us into the future. I think this is it's a really powerful experience because I think it challenges us to rethink what it is that we may believe about the world and our role in it, and about how things occur in it, how we address certain crises, how we might be able to create a better future and correct the things that are happening at present that we don't like. In many ways, we are sort of deconstructing the world and putting it back together. And in the course of doing so, giving people the confidence and the capability of being able to meet whatever challenge may come their way. A great deal of what we've been covering in the course, and what you'll see talked about in permaculture and other and similar systems, is a modern way of explaining old systems. It's using current language to describe old systems, or at least the patterns and the principles that shape them. They're doing it because tradition, again, and as you said, culture dictates that they do it that way, but they don't necessarily know the underlying. What are the underlying principles? What drove the shaping of the tradition? So in many ways, the course allows us to have a conversation, or we can deconstruct a lot of that information and that history, and try to, as objectively as possible, figure out like what exactly is happening here, and what are the nuts and bolts, what are the inner workings of what informs the shaping of certain practices, the ways of being able to put together systems of land management, or systems of, again, the shaping of sort of a social infrastructure that allows for the community to work. A lot of what we have been discussing is the way that how we go about doing things now in the modern industrial consumerist age. They can't continue for much longer, because the impact of rendering the world as some sort of outgrowth of an industrial vision is quite literally destroying it. And not only is it destroying the world, it's also destroying us. I think that's precisely the way that we've been framing it. Is this: if we were to just simply measure or judge the present systems currently at play on the merits of what it produces, both the good and the bad, we would find that the bad far outweighs the good. And especially if you were to kind of on a timeline, you were to continue to see these things play out, to where you see the benefits that come from that system go to fewer and fewer people, and then the negative impacts are distributed, among the vast, majority of humanity. And you get to a point where you very quickly realize that things that can't go on forever don't, and this can't go on forever, because you can see where it leads to, and it's not very difficult. The problem is I think most of us have not been really trained or conditioned to pay attention. And a great deal of what we talk about in the class is just having the ability to observe and be aware of your surroundings. And based on your ability to collect that information, be able to assess it as objectively as possible, and then start putting it together in a way that makes sense, maybe we can have a very different outcome. We can actually have something that works for most people, something that doesn't rely on exploiting or destroying or denigrating, humiliating people and planet and,
Yeah.
and all the rest of it. So, it's an interesting mix between talking about technical things and talking about ethics. There's a great deal of what we've been discussing is really rooted in, talking about ethics and principles and how that informs our decisions. And that it's not simply a matter of talking about technique or technology or science. All of those things need to be shaped by a particular way of understanding that information. That's not independent of, knowing whether or not what you're doing is right or wrong. And I think for a lot of people, it's actually quite refreshing
Yeah.
that they realize they realize that ethics aren't that people caring about those types of things isn't kind of some old antiquated idea. That it matters, it matters. There's a book that I had shown or mentioned in the class. It's a book called Reconstruction by Way of the Soil, and it's written by a man named Dr. G.T. Wrench. It was published in the 40s, 1940s, and he goes and talks about kind of makes a historical survey of human history in relation to the successes and failures of those civilizations with regard to how they managed their managed the environment, and used resources to build and maintain their societies and civilizations. And pretty much all across the board, it's all failure. It's all a story of failure. Interestingly enough, until they come to one particular place, and that particular place was Moorish Spain. It's Muslim Spain. So there's a chapter in the book where he goes and describes the developments that were seen, during the time of Moorish Spain, and how remarkable it was that you didn't see these at the same during the same period of time, you know, in particular, specifically in relation to what was happening in Europe, that the Muslims here were far ahead of what you saw elsewhere. Now he goes in to start talking about or wanting to examine why that was the case, and what he concluded was it had to do with the ethics and the principles that shaped how they went about making decisions. So kind of in summary, like the idea was, well, just because you might have the technical capability, you might actually be able to do something that you may actually not, it may be in your best interest not to do. It actually may be wrong to do. And having the ability to determine whether or not you should do something that you may be capable of doing, that's a very different type of intelligence. So he thought it was worth investigating where did these ethics come from that created this civilization. And then in the next chapter of the book, he basically goes into this an abbreviated retelling of the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad and the emergence of Islam, because he wanted to find out, okay, well, where did the ethics of these people come from that actually created the civilization? And I think that's a really amazing thing to conclude, is that this book that's supposedly about the rise and fall of civilizations connected to how they went about managing land led him to looking into the origins of to the emergence of Islam. And I think that speaks volumes to having those conversations about the importance of ethics and talking about that discussing that in reference to outcomes linked to land, and how one's ability to deal with land is a commentary on one's character. I think that really got people very curious. So as you mentioned the hadith about, the person who revives dead land, like, owns it. The one also about, whoever who revives dead land, that whatever is able to eat from it, whether it's a bird or an animal or a human, that's reckoned as charity, for that person. Or whoever plants a tree or sows a field and whatever eats from it, again, that's charity again. So the the very close connection, the very close link to, how one manages land and the purpose by which they manage it, and the benefits that are gained by the community at large by someone doing that work, is it's a proof of someone's claim of not only, say, their belief, but also the quality, again, the quality of their character, the quality of their belief, because they're doing something that extends beyond simply, again, benefiting them or some kind of selfish pursuit. It's understood that what they're doing has an impact on the larger society and the world, and that's going to be sort of a legacy that's going to speak for them,
Yeah.
much louder than any words they would have spoken. That actually what they left is going to serve as a much more powerful testament, to the quality of who that person was, and the fact that as many references there are in the tradition, talking about nature, like, look to the signs, that this is the ayah, this is this speaks to the qualities of the divine. That if you are to properly understand the who God is and what He does and the attributes of God, that you have to get out here. You have to experience this, and you have to be able to understand, again, the underlying principles that determine how it works, the patterns that you're able to, um, that you become aware of the more you spend time observing it, and also understanding how you are positioned in the midst of it, that you're not separate from it, that you're a part of it, and that if you're going to be a part of this, you need to find your place and play and serve whatever role it is that was intended for you. And I think that's also, I think, a very powerful idea that speaks to many people, because I think they do have a sense that, something's not right, and there's something that they should be doing that they aren't doing yet, and a great deal of that is just due to simply not having the information, and not being able to properly contextualize, where they belong in relation to, everything that's functioning and operating and at work in the world. So I found that people have sort of a newfound sense of purpose, and they have a confidence, like that they actually they can go out and they can do something that's worth doing, and they can actually have a beneficial impact, on the world around them, and that they just don't simply have to sit and watch as everything just goes to ruin. That they actually have a role to play in improving things that need to be improved.